Hello, everybody. Welcome to the CertiCraft. We are on episode 12 today. Really excited to have Dan Sutton from Tantalus Labs here today. I'll introduce him in a few moments here. Just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items and introduce myself and the CertiCraft. So for those of you who are new here, the CertiCraft is a bi-weekly show where we bring guests that we really respect in the cannabis industry and just have discussions on the state of the legal craft cannabis industry, what's going well, what's not going well, what needs to be addressed and how. And it's really meant to be an open-ended discussion where our guests get to share their perspectives. And it's hosted by myself. I'm Sami, the CEO of CertiCraft. CertiCraft is a company on a mission to help craft cannabis producers transition into and thrive within the regulated market here in Canada. And our primary service towards that goal is a seed-to-sale platform that helps you stay on top of all the regulations and compliance and generates all the reports and whatnot that you need to make the government happy and to make your life simpler and easier. A few housekeeping notes. If you want to say hi, which I really encourage you to do, we have a chat section where you can share whatever comments you want. If you have questions, we have a dedicated questions tab. We'll have 15 minutes at the end where we'll go through the questions and we'll have a Q&A with Dan. And what you can do is you can upvote questions that you like, and at the very end, we will we'll just go through an order of most upvoted to least until we either run out of time or run out of questions. And without further ado, I am going to introduce to you the lovely Dan Sutton.
What's up, everybody? Good to see you. I'm just spamming the chat with shameless Tantalus Labs Harlequin promotions. I actually am hoping to smoke some weed on this thing today. Is that all good, Sami? Can I smoke dope while we're talking?
That is all good, yeah. I will... I'm happy for you to do whatever makes you feel comfortable and happy.
That's great. We'll save it for when we get to the tough questions. And also, what about cussing? Sometimes I get a little blue when we're talking.
Totally okay. There's no restrictions here. This is this goes up tagged as not kid friendly on YouTube, so anything's fair game.
All right.
we just ask that you be respectful. That's all. As long as you're cussing respectfully. It's great.
I'll be cussing with enthusiasm, probably. That's kind of
great. Yeah, bring the passion, man. That's what we want.
That's it. Well, thanks so much for the opportunity today. I'm stoked to hang with your audience and to get to know you a bit better. And power to you. We need voices. We need voices to be screaming from the rafters about the future of craft cannabis, about the challenges, the roadblocks, as well as the opportunity. And I've got a perspective, but there's so many important voices out there, and I think you're doing a great job of bringing them together. So I'm just so proud to be on this today and great to be able to kick it.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate the kind words. And maybe before we get into it, could you share a minute or two or whatever you feel is relevant about yourself so that those in the audience who aren't familiar with you can have a sense of who you are and why we've brought you here today?
Totally. So my name's Dan Sutton. I'm the founder of Tantalus Labs and the CEO currently, as long as they'll have me. I grew up in Vancouver, BC, born and raised. My parents moved to this country with basically nothing and built a really cool life for myself and my family and my siblings. And I went to UVic, where I got a bachelor's degree in economics and a master's degree in smoking weed. Cannabis has been a huge... Oh, I got the spit take. I got the spit take right out the gate. This is how we do it, baby.
Couldn't wait till I wasn't drinking tea, could you?
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, cannabis has been a huge part of my life, man. I've been smoking dope since I was a teenager. I don't mind saying that. And for me, it's been a really amazing journey of kind of enhanced empathy, love and passion for the plant. As I've gotten to grow in my role over the last 9 years, I'm surrounded with a team of really amazing operators that teach me about cannabis all the time. We've got a fantastic cultivation crew with many operators from the MMAR and prior to that. And I mean, respect to Cali, respect to Holland. The BC has some of the deepest cannabis agronomy, agriculture, cultivation, breeding insights in the world. And it's so sick to be able to just fall deeper in love with this plant every day. And I think that's been our mission. We built and designed our Sun Lab facility as Canada's first pins up greenhouse designed specifically for weed.
What does it mean when you say pins up? What does that mean?
So we went through a permitting process where we didn't say this is going to be a tomato greenhouse or we're going to convert a greenhouse. We said we're building this thing specifically to nurture the cannabis plant.
Okay.
It gets into details like how you control for humidity and airflow, which are a bit different in the way you would cultivate green peppers or forestry seedlings or tomatoes or anything else we cultivate in this area of the world. And so our facility is sort of meticulous detail helps us really create a day spa for cannabis. That's what we want. And more, we're diving into the importance of post-processing, long curing, how we hang dry the plants, all that kind of stuff makes a huge difference to the end consumer's perception of quality. And so it's been a really cool exploration and labor of love. And every person on my team, they don't necessarily smoke cannabis every day, but they all really love that plant and they all serve that plant as a greater mission than just getting their paycheck. And it's a really cool environment to be a part of.
That's amazing, Dan. I love your passion. I love your story. I love your history. And Tantalus Labs has always been a company, in my experience in this industry, that people have always really respected and spoken highly of. Like no matter who I've talked to, I've never heard a bad word about Tantalus Lab. And I know you've inspired a lot of people. And so I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing, and I'm glad that you're here today. And I think I've got one last question for you before we really get into the discussion, which is, to me, the way I kind of describe you when somebody asks about Tantalus Labs is that you guys are the craft cannabis of the big LPs. That's kind of like how I think of you. You guys have a 70,000 square foot facility, but you really do care about really high quality everything. You hang dry. I think do you hand trim? I don't know if you do or don't.
We machine trim and hand finish. So we're not quite under the wire of the OCS definition of craft, but respect, that means that there's more room for the hand trimmers to do what they do. But when you're moving 200-300 kilos a month, the machine trim is definitely a big part of what we do.
Yeah. Yeah, and you guys really care about quality. Like I know you rep living soil. You use sun grown. You try to collect rainwater and use that to water your plants, which I think is amazing that you guys are thinking in that kind of more environmentally conscious approach. And my question to you, and I think it would be helpful both for myself and for our audience, could you give us a sense of how you see the difference between a facility like yourself and maybe some of the micros that we have on this call here today as audience?
Totally. And look, first and foremost, craft is definitely a spectrum. I think craft is probably in the eyes of the beholder ultimately, but we know what we do is different than what can be achieved in a micro environment or a really small LP environment. We got mad love for those operators. That's the kind of weed that I like to buy. And they are attacking a market segment with exotic genetics, with highly specialized, finishing protocols that inevitably are less feasible and less functional at a given scale. Mm-hmm. Now, that said, Tantalus Labs is independently owned and operated. We got a really small team. We've had many of our team members, that have been with me now for 5 years plus. And that kind of family dream team vibe that we cultivate, I think that is really a nexus of craft, a focal point of craft that often gets overlooked. It's hard to articulate what the definition of craft really is. And I think some people look at it as a size thing, which is totally reasonable. But the fire in the belly of the team has got to be a core component of that. Mm-hmm. So Tantalus Labs does a lot of things in a crafty way. We love, long curing and hang drying, as I mentioned before, but we've also rolled and sold, maybe 3.5 million pre-rolls almost. And so how can we call ourselves, a tiny mom and pop shops when we are in many ways doing battle with the big LPs and succeeding? So I think it's really important to underscore that those micros, especially BC micros, but micros across our country that have names for all their plants, that have, genetics that wouldn't really function at a large scale, that have hand trimmers that are coming in to rush through an order and they stay late and maybe they're getting stoned and listening to some good tunes, but they're putting in, that backbreaking effort to get that product into people's hands and get people excited. We know that they exist in a special place, and Tantalus Labs is different than that. So on the craft spectrum, we're not a commodity producer. We really care about wicked genetics and all that stuff, but we'll never be a micro and have that degree of specificity. So mad love to the micros out there. I'm trying to buy your eighths for $50. I don't want to pay 35. I want to pay more. That's my view, to keep everybody going and keep everybody in the supply chain well fed.
Well, I'm sure everybody who's a micro cultivator on this call is smiling right now, and also hoping that they can sell their eights for $50.
We need more $50 eights. This is the thing that the distributors are not acknowledging. But when it comes to it, and of that $50 eighth, maybe 22 or 23 is ending up in the hands of the producer because we're taking so much margin. Yeah. Fair enough. Retailers got to eat. I get that. Distributors got to eat. I kind of get that. The feds need to eat. That's a heartbreaker. But those markups through the chain really do pull away. And so I think when people complain about price, when I see people complaining on the internet about price, they're not appreciating how much markup has to go through the process to get those. And what's actually, they see a $50 eighth, they're like, those guys are taking my shirt off here, but it's really not the producers that are doing that. And many of these guys need those to continue to perpetuate their businesses. Yeah,
anybody who's used to the legacy world, you only had one, maybe two middlemen there. Now that's doubled or tripled even in the numbers of people that are putting their hands in the chain and how much they're taking out at every step, and the insurance cost and the legal cost and the business, and just all these new costs that have emerged that just your average consumer might have like no consideration of or understanding that that's part of the reality.
Well, there's one big article of reform that could actually change that to allow us to be able to deliver greater value proposition and still flow that through to the end producer. It's excise tax, but we're going to come back to that. We don't need to jump on the excise tax quite yet in this discussion because it's heavy territory. But that excise tax regime needs to change. That's the number one thing that we need to change.
All right. Well, Dan, with that in mind, let's transition into how we usually start these discussions. And yeah, perfect time to light up that Harlequin, which is, what do you think is going really well in the craft cannabis world, in the legal craft cannabis industry? If you had to pick one or two things, what would really come to mind as things that are going well?
Well, I mean, I think I've got to be mindful of my own perspective and kind of my curse of knowledge, which is that we've been legally cultivating since 2016 in the MMPR that became the ACMPR. And we were there on day one of legalization, in was it 2017 or 2018? I don't even remember. Yeah, there we go. And at that
October 13th, I believe, sometime in October. Anyway, doesn't matter. I don't want to interrupt. Go ahead.
So that, by the nature of that date, we'd only seen the micro licenses really available for the 6 months prior to that, and the outdoor licenses and stuff. And so craft cannabis, in terms of facilities smaller than 20 or 30,000 square feet, didn't really exist at the outset of legalization. Mm-hmm. Since that time, the retailers struggled to be able to get supply in those early days. They struggled to be able to get consistent supply, even from producers they like. And that's a common criticism of Tantalus Labs, is like, you guys came out with some hot fire and then we sold it all and we couldn't get any more. And I'm like, yeah, it's tough being a smaller operator out here. But they were frustrated by the lack of quality offerings that was available. This is sort of in the 2018, 2019 period. Mm-hmm. And since then, as I talk to retailers, they are just so pumped. We have a way broader diversity of cool genetics, interesting teams, people that have carved out a niche of quality and getting people excited about, terpinous, high THC in some cases, oily, greasy, like it's got a nice grease ring on there. Speaking of which, sorry, shameless Tantalus plug. I can't help myself.
You can make as many plugs as you want. That's part of this goal. If we're bringing you as a guest, we want you to plug yourself.
Full disclosure to your audience, it is actually part of my job to shamelessly plug Tantalus. So I'll try to keep it. I'll try to keep it to a minute. And so I've just, knowing what it takes for those teams to get across that finish line, and actually to finish line, the start line, to actually get their products into consumers' hands, and then see retailers get excited, see sell-through happen, that I think is amazing. And if we get it right, the diversity, the differentiation, the novel genetics, all of those things should really continue to spool up over the course of the next 5 years. I mean, we're looking at it happen in the big LPs, in the public markets, a ton of analyst commentary and investor commentary has basically said these huge LPs have lost massive market share over the course of the last, year, 2 years. Where is all that market share going? Because it doesn't look like it's getting sopped up by other large LPs. And we're out here saying, look, man, it's 1,000 small firms. It's 500 small firms that are delivering quality, converting people away from commodity grown cannabis, getting people excited fairly enough at a higher price point. And that's going to be a death by 1,000 cuts to companies that can't keep up with the quality demand at scale. So I think that's so exciting. And just to see rich tapestry of different people, different humans, different philosophies, different ways of growing, all come together to contribute to cannabis's hopefully infinite diversification. That gets me super pumped, man. That's super exciting.
Amazing. So I wanna take one particular phrase you said in the middle of that, which was, you said specifically, if we get this right, then this can be like a beautiful industry and market that emerges over the next 5 years with that diversity that you spoke of. What do you see, if anything, that's not going right now related to all that needs to shift to make this vision that you're speaking of possible?
So there's probably 100 things I could speak on. And like I say, like having the long-term perspective of having submitted probably 50 plus recommendations to Health Canada over the course of the first few years of our licensing process, many of which were adopted to say, this is broken, this needs to change, we need to evolve this, from an industry perspective, but also just from a regulatory perspective. There's certain areas where you need tight regulation. There's certain areas where you need to facilitate operation a bit more effectively. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you a story. Like, oh my God, I just ashed on myself. rookie move here. I'm trying to do 7 things at once, so I'm going to try to talk to you. We've seen some really awesome, success stories coming out of smaller producers that come to market. They come with a promise of quality. They get an audience largely digitally. They don't spend a ton of money on marketing, and that audience is fired up about their offerings. They're super stoked about the quality of the product. Brands like Gnome Star, Boaz, Carmel Cannabis. I could go on for hours. There's a ton of really good consumer success stories out there. Those companies, they start selling, their sell-through goes up, they start blowing up, they start not having enough product, and that's a good problem to have if you've built your financial models correctly. Yeah. Maybe they sell product at a price point that allows them to take a margin. All of a sudden, they're profitable, and then they have to pay their excise tax. Yeah. And this is absolutely heartbreaking. We're taking the excise tax out of the middle of the supply chain, and we're loading it all onto producers, and that has the effect of ripple affecting the price up as we go. And of the craft operators that I've spoken to that are now about a year in, or as long as a year in, to understanding their financials and understanding how much money they can actually make, they would be substantially profitable enough to grow their businesses organically, profitable enough to make sure everybody eats well, the lights stay on and they get to keep doing what they're doing. And then Health Canada, or CRA, I should say, is taking 20%, 25%, maybe 30% in some cases of their top line revenue. That's all of their profit and then some. And it's definitely true for Tantalus Labs. We have cash flowed. We cash flowed very early. We've had good financial health. And then every month, it's just such a ripping a duct tape Band-Aid off. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe we have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in some months to, just keep this whole situation going forward. And ultimately, we're still in the substantial minority of sales in Canada when it comes to legal versus illicit market cannabis. I think that I know a ton of illicit suppliers, a ton of legacy suppliers that are doing great right now. And they don't have a strong incentive. They don't have a strong incentive to come over and join us that are out here crashing through the brambles in the legal space. And mad love to all the craft operators that are in that zone, because they can't see a view to how to make a half decent living. We're not talking about getting rich. We're not talking about blowing the roof off. We're talking about making enough profit to be able to reinvest into your business, change your packaging, do some new SKUs, do those kinds of things. And so that excise regime is just ridiculously punitive, maybe unintentionally punitive. But at $1 a gram, it is no exaggeration to say that 20 to 30% and more of your top line revenue may go to that every month. And it just absolutely cripples a craft producer's ability to make money and stay on the playing field. If we don't grow our craft numbers, like we're not talking about keeping it the same of the amount of craft producers that are there now. We want to see thousands. We want to see so many, different people contributing in different ways. And it just rips me up that the government's milking a calf to death. I had a tweet thread on it yesterday. You're going to see more from me and from others on this topic, but that excise tax needs to change, dude. We're, like I say, we're not out here trying to steal money, trying to get rich, trying to make money quickly. We're just saying we need a sustainable business model that functions across businesses of different scale. And the crippling thing is, I know I'm rambling. I do this. Maybe I shouldn't have smoked all that weed, right? The large LPs don't really care. The large LPs are substantially subsidized by their shareholders. You got to keep in mind, every time you buy a pack of Shred, which is a commercial success and not hating on Shred, Organigram is taking a negative 40% gross margin on that product. That means that they are literally getting their shareholders to pay 40% of the price of that so that they can actually make money or quote unquote make shelf space. Mm-hmm. And that's just not a position that any logical business person nor craft like mom and pop style operation is going to be able to entertain. I can't sell my product at a loss. We wouldn't package up our shake and sell it if we were paying more for packaging and distribution than we were for actually making the money. So when you have that kind of environment, the large LPs, they can go on for 5 years, even if the tax regime is not sustainable, and they just wait for all their competitors to die, for all the people that are currently killing them in market share and sucking down their market share by a huge amount. They just slowly keel over, can't keep going, go into receivership. Maybe the large LPs buy them out of receivership. How fucked is that? Yeah. And so we're not going to get a champion in C3 or in the large LPs or in the politically connected LPs or in the LPs with huge government relations budgets. This is going to have to be an organic groundswell. This is going to have to be a bunch of small producers coming together and representing small business, which, by the way, was part of the regulations. They said they were looking at this through a small business lens, and now is the time to hold their feet to the fire. So rant over. That's my view. Fuck the excise tax regime. We gotta make some smart form changes.
So first off, I didn't realize it was that massive of a cut that was being taken out of the top line revenue of businesses in order to pay off that excise tax. That's huge, and I did not realize it was quite that big.
We pay maybe 3 times as much in excise tax as we do in labor. Tantalus Labs, as a labor input, we have like 65 employees. We pay living wages in Maple Ridge. We make sure all our people are well compensated, and so they feel committed to staying. And every month, that's 1/3 of what we pay in excise tax.
Holy shit.
Fucking crazy, right?
That's ridiculous.
Dude, and so what happened was, that's why I say unintentional, is that originally they built this tax model to say the larger of $1 or 10% of the price of the gram. It's called an ad valorem tax. And that means that you get 2 options and they'll take whatever's more. So inevitably, when they wrote that policy, they said, well, there'll be some stuff at $15 a gram. And so on that stuff, we want to charge $1.50. What they didn't realize is that ad valorem tax has never once been levied. There's never been a wholesale price of cannabis that was above $10. The average in the market right now is probably more like $5. And it's been pulled down substantially over the course of this year.
And sorry, just to interrupt for a moment there. Sure. The price that you're talking about there, are you talking about like a processor that has packaged and prepped something for retail sale, selling to a distributor, to a provincial distributor? Is that the sale that you're talking about when you say average is $5?
Right. Yes. The wholesale price of cannabis and that's at the end of the licensed processor chain, if that's the way you look at it. Tantalus Labs has a standard license, so we cultivate and then we process. We add our tax stamps and then we send it out the door. And luckily we sell for a bit above average, not a crazy amount above average. There's some people that can sell for a lot above average, but they just don't really get a lot of volume. So maybe that's the micro model to a T. But there's cannabis that sells for $2 a gram out there, and $1 of that is excise tax. It's just phenomenal to think. And so our view is that we can tell by the fact that the 10% number's really never been used, that perhaps someone in the kind of financial policy group that we're looking at how to tax this plant, they thought that wholesale prices would normalize maybe around $8 or $9. Well, that's not what's happened at all. And so I think that shows that Health Canada, Health Canada Finance Ministry and CRA together, they might not have been aware of what a huge cut it was going to be, but the way that it's played out, it's really just drinking the blood of these tiny businesses that are trying to grow and trying to get their feet under them as they launch a startup. Launching a startup sucks anyway. Launching a cannabis startup and then realizing you have to pay a pint of blood every month to keep on the playing field, it's disheartening. And that's not functional. Like, it's going to cause oligopolization in the industry. It's going to cause deep cuts to these people who oftentimes have double mortgaged their houses to be able to be in this business. Yeah. So that's why it gets me fired up. And I think that's why we need to motivate change by standing together and saying, look, you guys don't tax oil and gas this way. You don't tax alcohol this way. You don't tax CPG goods this way. You don't tax maple syrup this way. You don't tax any other product in this country the way you're taxing cannabis at the beginnings of an infant industry. And you're taxing us all to death.
Yeah. So, practical question here. You said that in the regulations they specifically stated that they wanted to model this to support smaller businesses, and that this was the time to hold them accountable to that. Where in the regulations can I find this thing that you're referring to? Because I want to do exactly what you're talking about. I want to go find that regulations. I've contacted both Health Canada and the CRA, and I want to reach out to them and tell them this is not okay. How can I go about doing that? What would you recommend?
So the taxation would be in the Cannabis Act. I have to admit, I probably haven't dusted that thing off in a while. But
well, you don't read it every morning before breakfast?
There was a time when I read it very, very thoroughly, of course, but it's not part of my day to day. But I think the core of it really is that the ad valorem taxation component should just be a floating number at the core of it. Figure out what that number is. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's not. And I do have another solution actually that might be, practical for this audience. You asked, how can you get in touch? You asked initially, how do you get in touch?
And importantly, like, is there a best way to frame things that you would encourage? Because you've reached out to government a lot. You've had these kind of experiences. You've made recommendations before. Like, I assume just sending an email being like, this is fucked up, I'm paying so much that's not going to land too well, Yeah. So like, how would you encourage somebody in our audience who's feeling inspired to add their voice so that the CRA knows this is like a legitimate issue? What would you say to that?
This is an awesome question. So I've met a lot of different cannabis growers. I've probably met like 500 cannabis growers, and there are a lot of cowboys out there. Anyone who's denying that is wrong. People that aren't used to team play. People that have come up on their own and they learn from a mentor and they're kind of a lone wolf. And a lot of you out there, some of you out there, probably not the people on this chat, probably the people that are not on this chat.
Definitely not our audience. Our audience is super respectful and kind.
Some of these operators lack diplomacy. You're in a highly politicized industry, guys. We are in the most regulated industry in Canada, period. And there's a degree of strategy around approaching public entities and government officials that you need to be mindful of if you want to get results. Now, look, I'm like numb to it. Like, I'm so deeply scarred by the processes that were true in the MMPR, where we spent 1,869 days getting licensed. Count that out. That's fucking 4.5 years. There have been so many times where I want to pound on the desk. And like, look at me, I'm a big guy, I'm bald, I'm scary. I could be like, this is insanity. But I learned to check myself, and I learned to be able to formulate that into a message that can be digested and respectfully received. Now, this is massaging it. It's all about when you think from their shoes, right? I think from the shoes of a policymaker or a bureaucrat. That's a bit different than a politician. The difference is the politicians are the ones that are out there championing causes and pulling people towards their party,
being public faces of whatever they're fighting for.
The bureaucrats are the operators. They're the ones that are getting knee deep in the issues and trying to figure out how to advance policy, sometimes shrink policy, mostly grow policy. And so you kind of have to frame up their view of the world, which there are probably some bureaucrats on this line right now. It leans towards more like being a hall monitor than it does about being an innovator. That's not meant to be disrespectful. They gotta protect the status quo at some element in their jobs. So always be super nice. I mean, come on, everyone's just out here grinding. They're working long hours. Everyone's pushing hard. So being respectful is really key. But more than that, frame up your idea. Say you want to attack a problem. Frame that problem up in a really concise way so you can articulate it clearly and show who it affects. Then if you're smart, you're going to come with a few ideas on how we can make some changes. And really, if you're really smart, you're going to come with a few ideas that are how do we get towards solutions. And so let's take what I'm talking about right now. This is like a fun way to deliver a punchline.
Yeah.
I definitely have done a ton of communication with the Finance Ministry, Health Canada, and CRA, but sometimes the greatest traction that you can get can be just from your own MLAs and your own people that will listen. There's a ton of smart people in cannabis policy across Canada. You got to dig a little deeper to figure out exactly who they are, but I'm happy to provide my own stakeholder map and show people kind of where they need to be talking to if they want to talk to the right people in BC, or if they want to talk to the right people in the Finance Ministry, or what have you. So there's a little digging, but your own MLA and your own representative should be able to plug you into the right people, and fostering a relationship with those local politicians, whether they be MLAs or MPs, or they just be like even municipal councils and stuff like that. They can get your message in the right places, and having a long-term relationship with them. If you want to be in the game in 10 years, you're going to be dealing with the same sorts of people, right? So you definitely want to make it known that you're here to work towards solutions, and you have an idea of some problems, but like you're going to be reasonable, respectful of their time, and respectful in general.
That's awesome advice. I'd never considered talking to my MLA, who actually is a huge, my MLA started the Cannabis Conservancy a while back, and she's super into cannabis and wants to see that world become better. I never thought of her.
Brittany Anderson?
Yeah.
Yo, she's money. Brittany's my friend. Yeah. Super smart, really cool. You know, it's balancing a political life with now a cannabis life, but she's a true believer. Like, she wants us to all succeed. So I'm with her.
And I'd never consider reaching out to her to be like, hey, do you have contacts in these different ministries and these different, I mean, it's kind of obvious now that you've said it, so I'm really thankful that you said it, but I never considered that before. So thank you for that.
This is the concept of lead gen. This is what I did before cannabis, lead generation. You got to think of every sales problem, every marketing problem, which ultimately policy problems are kind of sales problems. We've got to get our ideas into someone else's head, selling them on that. You got to do good lead gen. That's the strategy that you do to say, if I want to talk to this group of people, who do I know that can connect me to this group of people? And are they at arm's length from me? All that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's, it doesn't go on in the grow room, but I think this is part of the value that leaders in businesses that aren't growers can add.
Yeah. So for anybody watching here right now or on YouTube, we actually had Brittany Anderson on a previous Datacraft. I think it was episode 6, because you can go check that out on YouTube if you're curious to see what she has to say about the state of the legal craft cannabis industry. Back to you, Dan.
Brittany you mentioned Anderson reps up. Listen to the talk.
You mentioned there was a different solution that you had in mind around excise taxes and how that can be addressed to be something that actually is realistic and works well. What is that other solution? Are you open to sharing it with us here today?
I'm super open to sharing it. It's a complementary solution. First and foremost, the $1 per gram minimum does not make sense in a price compressed market where prices on average are $5 or less per gram. So we got to look at that. We got to change that. I know it's not simple. This is really scary because 75 cents on the dollar of every dollar in excise tax goes to the provinces. So have you ever bought a used car?
I haven't. I've never bought a car in my life. I've been car free.
Nice. But so when you go to get hopefully you never need a car, but if you ever do, when you first go to get your first car, that's a used car, they're going to play this trick on you where they say, I'm going to sell you this Mazda MX-6 for $2,000. And you say, I think it's worth $1,500. And they say, hold on a sec. I'm just going to go ask my manager, and I'm going to pop into the back. Everyone in this chat knows what I'm talking about. And then they come back out and they say the best he can do is $1,650. So when the provinces who do not have outspoken public facing stakeholders that we can go approach to say we need excise tax regime. Like it literally needs to happen province by province. And those bureaucracies are different. They're monopolies. You know, they really want to hold on to whatever piece of change they can get from the cannabis industry. And a lot of the distributors have lost money in the last couple of years, and they get bad press for that kind of stuff too. So Health Canada, or I keep saying Health Canada. When I say Health Canada, I'm really talking about CRA and Finance Ministry in this context. I'm just so used to complaining about Health Canada that they're getting a bad rap. Health Canada are killing it right now. They're so much better than they used to be. You know, respect Health Canada, but CRA, Finmin, Health Canada also has a voice in this. Like they do need to take on some responsibility and say, hey, we built this industry and now we're having trouble keeping it alive. So when they can say, oh, the provinces will never go for that, some people get turned off. Like some people are like, oh no, they're never going to change it. Like we've been told that straight up, that like this isn't a priority, you know, to change the excise regime. Of course it's not. It's
which is so absurd to me. It's like if the industry dies, like you're going to lose more money in the long run if people can't survive.
It's just a hard pill to swallow that this is killing the industry. And sometimes they can be resistant to that truth. They're like, I don't know if it's really killing the industry, man. And I'm like, it's really killing the industry.
I think that metric that you shared, that you have to pay every single month 3 times as much for excise duty as you do for your labor with 65 employees. I think that how do you hear that and then dispute that it's not sustainable?
I'm with you. So it's going to be a hard fight, and it's a worthy fight, but what we do need some coordination between provinces advocating for tariff reform, as well as Health Canada, Finance Ministry, and CRA all advocating for excise reform. So aside from that, change to just a floating percentage. That's the way to do it. It's going to result in some cheaper ounces. It doesn't really matter that much. And it allows us all to get the fundamentals into shape. There's no other jurisdiction in the world that taxes cannabis so heavily. And even in like jurisdictions where there's 15% levied at the point of sale, at the end customer, which isn't in the middle of the supply chain and falls completely on the producer, they still have taxation issues. They still have issues with competing with the illicit market. And so we got to be mindful that like, it's a young business. Let's make sure it has every resource it needs to go out and convert people and bring people into our way of thinking and get it regulated, and, you know, pesticides and all the great things that happen when we actually make that work, and show them a good financial value at the end of the thing. So I'm rambling again. The second piece is that I think we've got an amazing model in craft beer. This is provincially regulated generally. I think there are some federal implications, but if you brew below a certain amount of beer, 15,000 hectoliters, you get taxed at a certain level. If you brew more than that amount of beer, you get taxed at a higher level, which you can afford to pay because you have economies of scale that otherwise make your margins better on higher volume products.
Yeah.
Now, if you get down to like local distillery level, there's a whole other tax category. We've done that with licensing categories. We know the difference between a standard, a processor, a micro, an outdoor. And so there's that right there is an inherent acknowledgement that these businesses need to be treated differently.
Yeah.
Medium-sized businesses like us, large-sized businesses, you know, like an Afria, and then small-scale businesses like a micro, they really all have different burdens on their enterprises. And there's no doubt that the economies of scale in cannabis are huge. Like a good outdoor grower can grow for 30, 40 cents a gram right now. The best greenhouses are growing for like 60, 65 cents, maybe less than that. Mm-hmm. And so they can definitely afford to pay a bit more of their share.
Yeah.
And so real simple. We just put the alcohol regs in front of them and say, hey, this is how we tax alcohol. Maybe we should tax cannabis in the same way.
And so you're imagining like a different floating point percentage value for each of the sectors that you just outlined there?
So my negotiation coach told me to never say numbers first.
I'm not asking the specific numbers. I'm just asking if that's what you're imagining, that they would be numbers for each category. You'd have like X for your Auroras and Tilrays, Y for your Tantalus Labs and Rubicon Organics, and Z's for all the micros that you have out there. Is that like kind of the type of thing that you're imagining in your head?
Sounds like a good idea to me. That's about right. And it'll change business strategy a bit, because small to medium enterprises that are looking at expanding really rapidly, they'll have to think twice about that. and
Yeah.
say, should we stick to our knitting? We can do this scale at this quality, or should we go try to be a massive greenhouse operation? The same thing from the transition to micro to standard. You might say, hey, I could go do all this extra stuff, but I'm going to have to pay extra taxes. And so I got to be mindful of that. And hopefully, all else the same, it would drive an incentive to becoming a micro. You're like, oh, the numbers are a lot cleaner for us. And if I just want to run my small business, my family business, what have you, I think it would be a really logical progression to then being able to hold up business success stories to illicit market growers that have seen nothing but blood and guts in the papers. There's nobody out here killing it right now, especially the large LPs are losing money by the hundreds of millions a year,
Yeah.
We need to be able to demonstrate financial success.
Yeah.
Operational success, actual success in these businesses. Say this is something you can come in, you can do, you can make a good living, and you can pursue your dream of being in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, I mean, I live in the Kootenays, which is often considered the heart of the craft cannabis industry here in Canada. And I know that there, from research that Community Futures and a few other organizations here have done, that there's about 2,000 operators that want to transition. 1,950 of them are just waiting. They're just watching. They see all their friends trying and having a really hard time, and they're just like sitting on the fence. Or like, why would I do that? Like, I want the transition. I don't want to stay underground. I don't want to have that risk of my kids being taken away or whatever pressures and legitimate anxieties exist there. But at the same time, if I just enter this industry, I'm just doomed to fail. Like, I can't see myself succeeding. And so that's just one particular region within BC, and there's many others in BC and throughout the rest of Canada where there's a lot of people who are like that, who are just, they'd rather be legitimate, but not if it's impossible.
Right. And the not if it's impossible is a big question, right? Because I've been told 1,000 times that many different things that Tantalus Labs has now accomplished would be impossible.
Yeah.
And so there's an element of it where, like, I'm out here, preaching doom and gloom about a fucked up excise tax situation that I believe can change and will change and should change. And I believe that over 10 years, this is a great industry to become a part of.
Yeah.
There's a good phrase. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
The second best time is now.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think we all need to work together to push regulations in the right direction and facilitate the growth of, a global example of what a healthy cannabis industry should be. Yeah. But I also believe that if someone tells you it's hard and you shrink back from it, that's not a good instinct for being in the cannabis business or any business. So there's got to be a degree of, I'm going to figure it out no matter what.
Yeah.
And that has got me to this place where I can barely pay my taxes. So maybe I shouldn't be listened
to. and also, I think it's important to recognize that you are an incredibly ambitious human who's incredibly passionate, and you're willing to fight that fight. And you've been fighting that fight for getting close to a decade now. And most people who I met don't have quite the level of ambition and willingness to just like go for it that somebody like you or somebody like Earl Oliver might have. That is not like your average kind of. I just want to enjoy my life and do what I love and not deal with all the bullshit. that's a much more common sentiment that I hear.
Very kind of you. I assure you, I have investors and directors breathing down my neck to make sure I stay honest out here. But I don't know. I'm ambitious in some aspects of my life, and then I really like lying in bed for a day and eating a large pizza while watching Netflix. So don't get it twisted. Like, don't meet your heroes type of thing. But I think anybody who's been in the game for the last 20 years has that thirst to some degree, because they're saying, I have to sacrifice my own potential freedoms. I have to sacrifice, getting busted in on, which, by the way, seems like a pretty low risk today, or lower than it has been. So maybe there's an even stronger incentive to stay in the illicit market. I'm not preaching to the right audience.
I feel like it's the opposite of that.
They're cracking down, eh?
Yeah, the RCMP has been really cracking down hard on all the small craft growers who've always been left alone. They used to only go after the bigger operations, the people who are more, Hell's Angel oriented and, the more like high level organized crime. But as like last year, actually in Salmo, there was like a huge RCMP operation where they actually like cut down a bunch of plants for people who are medically licensed, completely legal, completely above board, standing there with their papers. I think there's a lawsuit that John Conroy is involved with about that specifically, but the RCMP have been going ham here in the Kootenays, and it's
wow, how did I miss that? I'm shocked to hear that, and that's super shitty. And like that, what the fuck are we doing? Like that makes zero sense to me.
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of pressure from my understanding. There's been a lot of pressure from top level RCMP on cracking down all of the illicit producers, so that people feel the extra pressure to transition and just shut down the illicit market.
Well, I can tell you right now that if they put pressure on the transition from that method, and then the transition results in businesses that fail, then what are we talking about?
Yeah.
And the excise tax regime is the greatest way to affect change in that. Like if you're on the sidelines and you're thinking about it, if all of a sudden you see, instead of, paying 20% of your top line, you're paying 5, you're paying 7, then you can really make a real business in this game, and you can sell cannabis at a price that people are willing to pay, of a quality level that is of value to them, and you can make more than a living. You can make enough to grow your business.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm thankful that you've been sharing all that. There's been not where I expect this conversation to go. I didn't think it would all be focused on excise duties and taxes, but it's a critical part of the business, and you are somebody who has a lot of insight to that because you've been operating, and you have a business model, and you see how it's been affected by that excise stamp, and so I'm thankful.
Oh, thanks, dude. I was just going to say, like, there are a lot of different changes that need to happen. There are changes that need to happen at the municipal level. There's changes that need to happen at the provincial level. Everybody's got a set of priorities, and I'm an advocate in many different contexts as well on other people's messages. Like, I like that. Bring me the idea, and I will help amplify it if I like it, and help amplify it if it drives us forward. But the excise tax is the most critical thing that no one's talking about.
Yeah.
Like, share this YouTube video, please. Like, go
totally.
out and
I plan to set. I have a contact the manager of the western region of the CRA auditors, who I think it's BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, maybe Manitoba too. But she and I have a great relationship, and my plan is to send it to her and to ask her to send it to whoever within the CRA would actually be able to like make any kind of decisions about this. Are you okay with me doing that?
I'm saying to your audience, I know you will. We're both going to share the shit out of it. To your audience, we need you guys to talk about this. We need you guys to stamp up and down about it, because if you're thinking of transitioning and you hear that the government's going to take 30 points on your package, which, by the way, is all the money that you make and then some, there's no way you're going to do it. So we've got to be smart. We've got to advocate for change. We've been telling this story to government for a year and a half, and they've been initially receptive and then kind of went dark on us. Yeah. So I don't know. We're going to charge.
We just need more voices. We need lots of voices to make it a cacophony that they just can't ignore.
That's it. And if that changes, once you have the money to make a bit of money, a lot of the other regulatory reform gets more flexible, right? You can push a bit slower. That you're okay. That you're going to make it. The next 6 months of the next year. And coming from a business where we haven't known that, for sure, we didn't know how long we're going to make it now, let alone how long we could have made it. Luckily, we're hard as nails, and we've been doing this a long time, and we're going to fight the good fight for as long as we can stay on the playing field. But of course, support your small producers. And Tantalus Labs hopes that we're leading this charge for years to come.
Cool. Yeah, and I think for me, like this conversation was eye-opening, and it really helped me understand, and I bet you it helped a lot of the micro cultivators that don't have a processing license understand kind of why the bulk prices that they get are so low, because that's been a really huge challenge for a lot of people when they're selling to a processor to get their stuff packaged. It's like, it's the same kind of thing. How am I supposed to make a living off these prices?
Dude,
and this sheds a lot of light on some of the costs that processors have that might not be obvious to a micro cultivator.
Yeah, the processors are all straight shooters. Like all the best processors out there, they're really incentivized to get you the best price they can. It makes their deal flow easier. It makes them, better companies. But they're really getting their lunch eaten, because they got to pay for the wholesale inputs, and then they got to pay Health Canada before it even gets into the markup range. And the pricing calculators have gotten uglier and uglier. We have seen a huge amount of price compression over the course of even the last 9 months, but certainly the last year. And that price compression, it's not, the premium market's not insulated from it. People are always gauging their price off of what an average price is.
Yeah.
So when 35 bucks an eighth is the average, then 42 doesn't seem so crazy. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat now.
Go for it.
But if the average price is 22 bucks and you're coming out trying to sell for 42, the distributors, the retailers, and the customers all look at you funny. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we're into the question and answer session, but we only have one question. So before we get into the questions, I want to ask you, Dan, and I'll ask this very slowly so you have time to cough in peace.
What happens when I talk too much? I always have a hoarse voice. Like I always have a fucked up voice. And people are like, dude, have you been partying so much? I'm like, no, this is just how my voice is. And it's because I'm yelling on the phone with people like you.
So this is why you need to get yourself a nice big pot of tea and just slowly.
I'm a coffee guy, but I don't drink as much as I used to, just a couple a day.
Yeah. So in these last 10 minutes that we have before we get to the one question that's been asked, is there anything else that you think is like a really high value thing to talk about, a thing that you think is really good that's happening, a thing that's really bad, a thing that needs to be addressed outside of excise tax that you think is worth spending 5 minutes chatting about here?
I'm going to talk about something I love, which is genetics. Genetics, you got to get your game tight. You want to be in the legal cannabis business. Everybody out is talking about having the best genetics out. And there are really cool genetics that are only available to a small number of people. And those are the stories that your consumers want to hear about. So we've seen a marketplace where a few genetics providers have spread good genetics really far around the market. And that makes them obviously less scarce and less exciting. And that can be a bad strategy mistake to get some really awesome genetics that it happens to be a bunch of other people are growing. We've done that a couple times, by the way, and not intentionally, but just by accident. We do our own genetics and we breed and phenotype and do our own selection processes. And we've always done that. So our stuff is always a little bit different than something else of the same name in the market, but it needs to be pretty substantially different. And I just believe that so many of the micros, so many of the people that are on the fence about coming in the market, they know more about genetics than any of the rest of us ever could. And they know some cool shit that nobody else really knows about. And the more of that stuff we get in the industry, the more exciting it is, for sure. So advice to the micros: do your own breeding, get a good breeder on your team, get some cool new genetics coming through, and you guys will have a ton of success. And that's where the market's going in the next 5 years.
Cool. And I'd say, the micros that work with us that seem to have the most success are the ones that have cultivar names that nobody else has.
Makes it easy for the distributor, right? It makes it easy for the rest of us.
Dan, so on that note, I want to give you another opportunity to plug yourself here. What genetics have you guys bred at Tantalus that you guys are really excited about that you want to talk about here before we switch over to the question and answers? And for anybody listening, this is your last chance to get a question in. There's only one question right now that's really the Q&A question. We have somebody who wants you to watch a video that they've shared, and we'll email that to you later on. But I digress. What genetics are you excited about that you guys have bred at Tantalus Labs?
So Tantalus Labs has never released a genetic that we ourselves have bred. We have only popped seeds, phenotype from seeds, found stuff that we like from breeders that we like, and then done it in kind of our own way and our own flavor. And we talk about those breeders a lot in our direct retail marketing activities. They don't make it as much on the forward facing stuff, but there are a ton of talented seed people out there that do stuff that we couldn't do. And we only want to be in the breeding game if we're genuinely going to be better than the next guy. We want to come correct. But we do have our first breeding project well underway. I'm not going to disclose what genetics we crossed, but I am going to tell you the name of it. It's called King Sherb. Look out for King Sherb. That might be a year away. I don't know. But when it comes, it's going to be cool. And it's our master grower is a name that he hates, but head of cultivation, a guy named Donnie Lungle, has been a partner of mine for 7 years. He is absolutely the inspiration the inspiration to everything that we do really perfectly at Tantalus and some of the things that we're growing towards perfection on. And he never really bred when he was in the prior iteration of his career. He would always follow the forums and always follow like the cool genetics and try new stuff and really let those breeders flex. But this has been his first opportunity to get in the breeding game, which if you know cultivation, that's like the deepest respect to the art, right? Is to make your own shit. And that's why it's so important that we all do it.
Yeah.
But to see his eyes light up when he gets to do that, we don't call it pollen chucking because it's more precise than chucking around pollen, but the combinations to create seeds and then the phenotyping process on those seeds, that's a cool thing to be able to deliver him, you know?
Cool, man. All right. Before we shift to questions, Mike Fundergy is one of the people on our team. He does Legal Larry, for those of you who know our company mascot and sock puppet, who is amazing. He made a comment that the coughing that you're having is it's something called muscle tension dysphonia, and it's something that he gets as well. And that if you Google that, you'll find some remedies. And so look up in the chat later if you want to get some insight into how to make your throat feel better in those long haul talks that you do and yelling at the phone, as you said.
Thanks, Mike. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear it. But I also love the coughing and the drama, man. It's like the wild. I'm an exuberant speaker, obviously. It's all I've got. So
cool. So the one question that we did receive is from Nathan Sean, not sure to pronounce your name. Sorry for probably completely mispronouncing it. He asks, "Hi Dan, can you touch on the Farmgate model? Could this work efficiently as just a micro cultivator?"
Nate Dog, I'm glad you asked. And I think it absolutely is critical to the success of microcultivators and localized cannabis economies anyway. So in short, Farmgate, if I run a micro and I can set up a little shop where I can sell my own products, not through the provincial distribution system, but just out my front door to customers that want to come by and hang out with my salespeople, hang out with my crew, hang out with me, talk about my grow. That allows a more localized economy. You don't need to get your stuff into 20 stores in Victoria and 50 stores in Vancouver to be able to be successful. You can just have people from your own neighborhood and maybe tourists that come through, buy your product for you. The more product you can sell through there, hopefully the less tax you'll have to pay or tariff to the BC LDV. You know, that's they aren't doing anything, so maybe you have to pay them a little bit, but not too much. This would go really well with a nice relaxation or reformation of the excise tax regime as well. But I think that localized economy thing is exciting for a ton of reasons. Like, first of all, imagine going on a bike tour of your favorite cannabis grows in Nelson, where you're from. Like, that would last all day. You'd be super stoned by the end. It would be amazing. And that's true in Southern Vancouver Island and the Kootenays and the Okanagan, everywhere. There's a ton. The Fraser Valley has a ton of really cool spots to go check out and see some legendary people doing some amazing things. And yeah, it means that you may still have to sell some to a distributor. I know that a lot of micros or smaller operators like to deal with Saskatchewan and Manitoba because they're a lot more flexible in your ability to deal directly with a handful of retailers that probably really like you. I think BC wants to get to that with their direct to sales model. We'll see. Farmgate has been a long time coming and they're going pretty slow on it now. We're going to hear more in 2022, but eventually that will become a highly prized and highly valuable destination. You know, I think that's the experience you're offering. And ultimately, you'll be able to sell directly to customers. That's always the game you want to be in.
Yeah. We got one more question right as I was about to wrap this up here. You made it just in time, Curtis Campbell. Good job.
Curtis, my guy.
What he asked,
Nate Dogg and Curtis Blow in the chat, so respect.
Great. What he asks is, would you come back in a year's time and give updates and share your year's experience? Do you want to be a guest next year, Dan? Is the question basically?
I will shout from every rooftop. I will come whenever you want me, Sami, and whenever anybody wants to talk on these kinds of things. I love to get into it as long as I can bounce it into my day. But like, I get to talk to all of you interesting people. I get to talk to Sami. You know, you shared some insight today around crackdowns on BC growers. I did not know that. That's horrible. That's so dumb, and I'm very opposed to it. So fucking thank you for sharing that knowledge and opening my eyes. I thought it was a smart time to stay in the illicit market, but there's clearly incentives on both sides. And we just need to foster a regulated market that welcomes that and allows it to be successful when they can deliver value to their customers.
Awesome, man. Any final thoughts you want to share after this amazing chat we've had with you today?
Dude, this is our community. You know, people call it an industry, but it really is a community. It's a diversity of different kinds of people, different attitudes, different businesses, and we've got to build it the way we want it. We can build it the way we want it. I believe that we can. It means disagreeing and moving forward in some cases. I've learned this myself, and I think a lot of people need to be able to align on some issues and not align on others. That's why I can get out and jump up and down about micros, you know, even though I want my own non-micro standard business to succeed. Maybe I don't want everything that the micros want, but maybe I want 95% of it. And that's the 95% we should think about. Cannabis can be divisive somehow. I don't really understand. It chills me the fuck out. But for some people, they really want to get in the like locked horns of battle over something they're passionate about, and that can be valuable in some cases, but sometimes you got to get in those lock horns. I lock horns with people and then I love them more after. Can we do that? Let's all do that together, and that will allow us to speak in a cohesive voice on issues like excise tax that affect everyone, that are super important for every person that's listening to this now.
Yeah, and no matter where you are in the spectrum of size and style of company in the world, like 90 to 95% plus of the companies out there, these changes that we're talking about and others that you didn't touch on because you didn't feel they were as important, they'll make everybody just have a much easier go of it and be able to have an actual industry that then thrives. And that all trickles down then to the consumer, because then prices maybe make more sense when you don't have 30% of your top line taken away from you, and all the other various issues that do exist as well, supply chains that are out there.
Yeah, as much as I'd love to do celebrity boxing with like any number of cannabis CEOs that are total idiots, but if they want me, I'm out here, pay-per-view, $1 million. Let's get
it. Well, with that being said, thanks for being here, Dan. Really appreciate you and your time. I know you're a busy guy, so appreciate you making the time in your schedule to be here with us today. I do think Sam Majadla, which I have a feeling is Sami, but it was spelled that J. I think it's a Sami that used to live in Argentina, if I'm not mistaken. Is that you? Well, I get a different last name, but okay. Hi, Sami. It's been a long time. Welcome back to BC. She had some questions for you. So if she wants you to take part in some kind of community event that she's organizing in Vancouver Island. So you can take a look at that question and respond as you see fit. After the end of the event, you'll still have access to the chat and the questions. Anybody who came late, as soon as this event ends, it'll replay right away. If you are watching this on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button.
And subscribe button. Clack, 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 clack. Hit the fucking button.
And last but not least, next time on episode 13, which I think is a lucky number, not an unlucky number. That's 2 weeks from now. We have the Craft Cannabis Association of BC. We'll have Sarah Campbell joining us, and I forget who your partner, what her name is, Sarah. Maybe you can put that name in the chat. I see Sarah's typing. Who's it going to be? Teresa Taylor. Yeah, that's the other person. Oh, Teresa Taylor said Teresa Taylor as well. Thanks, Teresa. Glad to have you on the chat here too. Sweet guys, thank you all so much, and hope you all have a lovely day. This has been the State of Craft with the lovely Dan Sutton.